Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, how would you rate the Comey testimony? A nothing burger, a quarter pounder with cheese, or just another Whopper? 2 straight-A wonky students gunned down at 10 p.m. 7 miles from home on a dark cul-de-sac on graduation day. Were the teens in the wrong place at the wrong time? Victim of anti-Muslim hate crime, or part of a drug deal gone bad? The law of unintended consequences. Political wannabes swarm to register for free public financing, and crowdfunding. What's a crowd pack anyway? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by industrialist and former Maryland Assistant Secretary of Business, William Askinazi. Education activist, Cynthia Rubenstein. Political strategist, Susan Heltemes. And Republican entrepreneur, Phil Bell. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Even Democrat political wannabes in Montgomery County find the county a difficult place to initiate their careers. First, county politics is dominated by an entrenched Democratic Party populated with political activists, all of whom have their own political aspirations. Second, candidates are prevented from accepting campaign contributions from political action committees. And if you're a Republican wannabe, you have a better chance of being hit by lightning than getting elected. Now, however, things may be changing. First, the county council created an $11 million public campaign fund, and recently, clever candidates have learned that they can use online services to raise political donations. In other words, crowdfunding for political candidates. No more slogging to doors, door to door, and neighborhood fundraisers. You can do it on the internet. Susan, will the creation of the public campaign fund inspire new candidates to run for office?
I think it will. That doesn't mean they won't necessarily win, but to sign up for this new funding, you can only take $150 max from any one person. And I got my first fundraising postcard today, and the candidate wrote on there, if you've already given at least $150, you can't give anymore. And so I think that it will bring some new people out. Republicans can use it, Democrats can use it, and everybody's been going online for fundraising. That's really not that big a deal. But it does limit, how much any one person can give somebody. And for someone who may not have people with deep pockets, I think it's going to be an interesting way to enter a campaign.
Bill, many Republican candidates have told me that the cost of running and the difficulty of raising campaign funds has prevented many from running for office. Are these two innovations going to help that? Because let's face it, nobody wants to give a large donation to a candidate who doesn't have a chance to win.
Yeah.
And maybe you can multiply the small donations into a legitimate effort.
If I'm a Republican running in Montgomery County, it's not really truly about the money. For $25,000, you can have a legitimate shot at a county council seat. The issue has always been setting yourself apart from the crowd, being creative, riding that wave. And it's curious that I think Montgomery County, you're talking about a law and order wave. We're talking about crime later in the segment. But somebody who catches the right demographic, it has the right personality, that's what will elect a Republican in Montgomery County. I don't think the fundraising is going to be that big of a challenge, Casey. It's going to be personality, it's going to be timing, and it's going to be a coalition of interests, including independents.
Well, it's easier to win in a Republican primary than in a Democratic primary.
But the issue here is being able to raise money. Cynthia, you ran for office. Is this
Yes.
going to help candidates get out there and feel like they can compete now instead of having to financially ruin themselves and self-fund every
Well, not
campaign?
only financially ruin themselves, but only go for high-dollar donors and interests that can provide high-dollar contributions. This is a very small d Democratic way to enter politics. And I think that we're going to see some really creative candidates in this cycle really tap into many small donors. They're still going to do neighborhood parties. They're still going to do mailings. They're
still
going
gonna
to
knock on doors.
They're still going to knock on doors.
Well,
And that's exactly what should happen, because that gets people invested in the process.
Exactly.
I
Skin
love
in
the
the
idea.
game.
I love the idea of crowdfunding. I think that's a great, that's a great opportunity for people. I'm not so hep on the county spending $11 million on public financing, but we'll see how it works. Now on to our second subject, which is a difficult one. The sensational killing of two teenagers just hours before they are to graduate from Northwest High School in Germantown. It's a heartbreaking story. Our team Zubrayov and Adir Najjar appeared to be the epitome of American success story. Both Zabirov and Najjar were honor students at Northwest High School and looking forward to college. And yet, they were gunned down in what some law enforcement officials have described as a cold-blooded ambush just hours before their graduation. Phil, this is a difficult story to discuss with so many questions and so many unknown answers. But doesn't this fit into the larger narrative about the increase in criminal activity here in Montgomery County?
Yeah, it absolutely does, because when you think about it, first of all, a lot of crime that takes place in general is almost never taking place at random. Usually if someone's getting shot, unless they're getting mugged, something like that, it's usually something that they might have some association with one way or another. So that's something that has to be thought about. To what extent has it permeated the schools? To what extent is just in general we have a larger criminal element here, and why? So absolutely, there is an increase in crime here. This is something that has to be addressed, and I'm very eager, not happy, but eager to see what the result is of the investigations that are coming here.
Cynthia, there are indications that the location where the killing took place, the fact that it was 7 miles from their home, the report that the victims were found holding cash in their hands, and there was a suggestion by police that there may have been more than one shooter. These are all troubling circumstances. Because of your background in education, talk a little bit about the drug culture that affects high schools today.
The drug culture in high schools has been part of high school culture since I was in high school. But one thing that's different in Montgomery County is that, and what's interesting sometimes, is that we're a very affluent county, and in some schools, it's the more affluent schools where the students have the more wherewithal to be involved in substance abuse. But Montgomery County has done a lot to try to stem this. There are school resource officers in high schools, and their job is to be community officers in high schools with students, to have their ear to the ground. In this case, we don't know exactly what happened. We don't know definitively that this was a drug deal gone bad, but the signs are very troubling. And these two poor young men have lost their lives, and their families have lost their loved
there's
ones.
something here.
Well,
Let's go to Bill first.
Montgomery County has urban problems. We're not the county of 20 years ago. Crime has come to the county. There's going to be more and more violence, unfortunately. And Police Chief Tom Manger is one of the best police chiefs in the entire country. And we need more funding for police officers, more training, both innovative and in the schools, as you say, but also back on the beat, because this is not going to go away. The gangs are rampant, and they're causing these terrible crimes we read about every day.
I don't think we want to rush to judgment on that, because one of the newspaper articles said that one of the kids was going to be selling extra tickets for his high school graduation that he didn't need. So I would hate to alarm the community for what we don't know yet.
Susan, he may be raising extra money, but they're not going to be sitting in a car with money in their hands.
But if they were at money in their cars, why didn't the perpetrators take the money then?
It's a wonderful question, and obviously this investigation. I can only imagine how painful this must be for their parents. I was called earlier this week by a client whose son had been picked up for possession of marijuana, and he was devastated because he didn't know. His high school son, he didn't know that his son was involved this way. So you don't know as a parent all the things that your children can be involved in. This is a terrible situation, and I hope they are able to investigate and find the perpetrators very quickly.
Yeah, and that's important, because there's a difference between drug culture, as you discussed, and drug culture. Drug culture, the sort of thing that gets people killed, that might have something to do with this, although you're right, we shouldn't speculate yet, is a lot worse of an animal than simply the guy or gal that always has some marijuana, or perhaps your your client's son, that, yeah, that's always existed. But the closer that we get to the Pablo Escobar type, and granted that's a little extreme, but the closer we get to him, the more violence and disruption that we will see here.
Well, unfortunately, there are parts of Gaithersburg which are being known as ganglands, where you don't want to go.
We'll trace that back. Why? How did they become ganglands? Don't we go back to the sanctuary city issue? I mean, as painful as it may say, a lot of these folks who are committing this crime have come from Central American gangs.
Except
and
right.
they get in.
Exactly
the
right.
gang
And they
issue in
perpetrate
Montgomery
the
County,
violence
though, goes across
affecting
all
the whole
races.
county.
Black,
races.
Asian, white,
But
and
it doesn't matter if it
Latino,
goes
all of them.
across all races, those who are bringing it here and those who are bringing the process and the activity. That matters.
That's going to be the last word, because we're going to go to break. When we come back from this short break, what's the takeaway from the Comey testimony? Was he the last honest man in a corrupt system, or just another lying weasel trying to save his backside? Stay tuned. We have some strong opinions on this one. And welcome back. How important was the testimony of former FBI Director James Comey? It was so important that D.C. bars and restaurants sponsored testimony parties and featured covfefe cocktails created just for the occasion. Yet the 500 patrons who watched the 2.5-hour hearing at Union Pub in D.C. shuffled out after it was all over, calling the whole affair underwhelming. But that didn't prevent the usual suspects from retreating to their respective quarters, doing their best to twist the testimony to suit their purposes. Susan, CNN's Chris Cillizza, called James Comey the big winner yesterday. But it should be noted that Comey's testimony did not settle whether Trump committed obstruction of justice, or did it?
I first want to note that the people who were upset at the bars were promised free drinks every time Trump made a tweet, and he was under control yesterday, so they left without free drinks. But
What's that have to do with anything, Susan?
you said they left, they were dissatisfied. But when it comes to the winner, James Comey, who is respected by the FBI and throughout the legal community, came away, and it's his word perhaps against Trump's word. But Trump has been proven to lie about all sorts of things. So I think, yes, Comey was the winner, and everything now is up to Mueller. And it doesn't matter what came out yesterday. But as someone said, though, we left yesterday like half of a hip-hop song. We got half of it, but the best part was afterwards when they went behind closed doors. That's where the good stuff was.
All right, Phil, President Trump tweeted a very different view than what Susan just projected. He said it was complete vindication.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it was. This whole process hinged on one question that Senator Burr asked. Did Russia change any of the votes? And James Comey said no. That was the reason this started, and that's why this should have ended a long time ago, because we knew that wasn't the case. It was proven again yesterday that wasn't the case, and tomorrow that will still not have been the case. Therefore, there is no Russian meddling in the election. There were no votes changed. There's nothing to investigate. Let's go and have debates about what really matters: tax reform, health care,
You are
and so
so
on.
naive.
Bill,
Wow.
wait a
Yes.
minute, girl, ladies,
Wow.
you're going to have a chance to weigh in. Bill, former Congressman Pete Hoekstra said that there were 4 takeaways from yesterday: that Loretta Lynch had meddled in the investigation of Hillary Clinton's private website, that the media was shown to manufacture a narrative designed to hurt President Trump by printing unsubstantiated rumors, that President Trump was a liar in the opinion of James Comey, and that James Comey admitted to be a self-serving and smarmy. What was your takeaway?
James Comey orchestrated this whole thing. He loves the limelight, probably more than President Trump does. He was very, very savvy. He got ahead of the curve, and Trump was out-Trumped. I think there's a whole stage 2, act 2, scene 2 coming. We'll know what's happening then, but this was very good political theater. No substance, mini burger.
All right, Cynthia, according to Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz, you cannot have obstruction of justice when the president is exercising his constitutional authority. So did the claims of an obstruction of justice case against Trump just go up in smoke?
I don't know if they went up in smoke, but it would be very hard to call this hard and fast obstruction of justice. It is a big political problem for President Trump. It was unwise of him to draw James Comey alone in the Oval Office and say whatever he said without Jeff Sessions, James Comey's boss, there. He should never have done that. Donald Trump has shown himself to be willfully ignorant, not willing to listen to his advisors, and impetuous, impulsive, and of course, in my opinion, unfit for office.
But if all of that is
All of that can be true.
All of that is true.
All of that can be true.
And
but I do
what Phil
not
says is
believe,
correct,
having heard
why don't we shut down these
other
investigations?
legal experts speak, that this will rise to criminality. But it was very unwise and stupid
It is,
politically
but
for
this
president.
investigation is no longer, did they affect a vote? Maybe they didn't get into the voting systems like that other slip earlier, but this
They
goes beyond.
attempted, and they will
Hold
not
on.
But wait a minute,
stop.
let me
They will
finish.
not
It
stop.
goes beyond that. It goes
Where's the
beyond
conspiracy?
meetings.
Where's the conspiracy?
No,
Cynthia?
it has nothing to do with that. It's
Where
the,
is it?
It's
Then
the
why
me-
are we having the investigation? if
Because
there's
it
no
goes
conspiracy?
to Kushner, to Sessions, to Flynn,
The only-
and
Wait,
the
but
and
Susan,
the
you know what?
interactions with
I'm
Russia
gonna-
that
I'm gonna agree
apparently
with you.
have to
I'm
do
gonna agree
with
with you.
money.
Susan,
and,
I'm gonna agree
and
with
you
you
have
for a
to
second.
follow the money, and that's what Mueller is doing.
If we're going to have these investigations because of the phishing and the so forth, will we also have investigations about Democrat voter intimidation, interference, and so forth that we've been talking about, not just for 4 years, not just for 8 years, but for about 20, all of those things. But we never had any investigation about that. Will you support that type of investigation?
I
too?
have been on the other side watching Republican
I'm going to guess the
intimidation.
answer
So
is no.
Very,
Hey, Bill.
very interesting revelation that is kind of glossed over in the press. That the only leak that was discovered was a leak by Comey to the New York Times through his friend. And why did that happen? Because he said he wanted to get a special prosecutor involved. Come
Which
on.
was not
That's as
illegal.
deep state as
It
it
wasn't illegal for him to leak.
no, he was a
do we
private
know?
citizen.
Well,
he was a
Private
private
citizen, not
citizen.
illegal.
Yes,
It was an FBI report.
Was he leaking FBI
was an
documentation and
FBI report.
federal
No,
government
he
property?
leaked a convecation.
They
But
have
it was
not.
a member
not
of the
they
public.
have
A
classified.
member of the
not
public.
yet.
What the
A
FBI
conversation.
prepares is a report
Yeah, Maryland
of the
Public
incident.
could
Well,
not get
what
that
I heard
report.
today is that across the board, everyone is pretty much convinced he's a private citizen. You can't do anything about it.
Well, I don't,
So-
Susan, I think when you say across the board, it's across the Democratic board. Because as we've shown tonight, there are two very, very wide differences between the
And
Republican
that is
Party
why we
and
have
the
to.
Democrats on this.
I have a good amount of faith in Richard Burr and Warner from Virginia that they will
And Mr.
they will
Mueller.
lay out the facts
I don't have any
and they will
confidence in any of
reveal
them.
the facts
They're all-
as they
they're all
find them
slimy
to the American
politicians.
public.
Mr. Mueller
And
is not a politician.
Oh, yes, he is.
And what's ironic,
You don't think you get appointed to be head of the FBI?
what's
without being a
interesting I
politician?
learned today is that he was on the short list by Donald Trump to be appointed again, and he was okay with him having been there
Well, you know,
before.
I guess he could make two mistakes. He didn't,
He's made so many
He
already.
didn't fire Comey the day after he got sworn in. That was his first mistake. Stay tuned for Party Shots. And welcome back. Now, it's important to remember that as serious as we take the topic of conversations that we've had tonight and we've been engaged in for months, that we should never forget that there was a time when our nation's very survival was in jeopardy. 75 years ago, America was engaged in fighting two-front war in Europe and the greater Pacific theater. The devastation of Pearl Harbor by our Japanese foe and the apparent invincibility of Germany and their dominance in Europe produced the gravest test for America in its history. Somewhere between June 4th and 7th, 1942, the United States Navy, just 6 months after Pearl Harbor, reversed the course of the war in the Pacific during the Battle of Midway, where they inflicted an unimagined victory over the Japanese when their Navy destroyed 4 fleet aircraft carriers, thereby stopping Japanese expansion in the Pacific. 2 years later, June 6, 1944, the United States Army and its allied partners in 1 week accomplished the capture of Rome from the German and Italian troops and established a beachhead in Normandy that ultimately led to the defeat of Nazism. If not for the bravery of the young men and women who fought and died for our freedom then, we would not be able to engage in the political discourse that we exchange today. Thank you to all of our World War II veterans. Now for their parting shots, Bill Askinazi.
We can never forget the tens of thousands of Marylanders who are suffering every day in pain, serious pain, chronic pain, and endless pain. And my hat's off to the Maryland Court of Special Appeals who stepped in and preempted an injunction which will finally allow medicinal cannabis to go forward and be grown. By the fall, by Labor Day, that drug, that medicine will become available and alleviate the pain of these Marylanders. And for that, I applaud the court.
Thank you, Bill. Cynthia Rubenstein, your parting shot.
Okay, well, this week was a bad week for Theresa May, but it was a very, very good week for women in politics in Britain. A record number of women were elected to Parliament, 200 women. In the last election, it was 191, this time 200. And my prediction and hope for 2018 is that in the United States of America, we have a comparable movement of women into elected office across the nation.
Thank you, Cynthia. Susan Heltemes, your parting shot.
Last night, I was fortunate to be a part of something for MC Media right here, the giving of the first Epic Awards at the Fillmore in Silver Spring. Joe Johns from CNN was the host, and awards were given to the Tacoma Radio, the Gaithersburg Book Fair, Maureen Bunyan, Jim Vance, Barbara Harrison, and some others. It was a great evening, good food, fun conversation. If you haven't had an opportunity to give money to keep this very entity going, go to my MC Media. Go to the top of the page, click on donate, and give some money. Let's keep this station going.
Thank you, Susan. Phil Bell, your parting shot.
Last month, after 146 years, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus ceased operations. And that had a really big impact on me because after 146 years, something that's been around longer than even baseball and entertained millions of people, this great American institution has finally ceased, which is very sad, but it was great to see something so long-lived go out on such a high note.
Thank you, Phil. You know, Phil, I was able to see one of the last performances of the circus when it was here in Washington, D.C. a couple months ago, and it was so much. It was thrilling. It was you know, it brought back my childhood. I took all my kids and in-laws. It was a great evening, and so it's something that I think is going to be missed. I want to thank all of the panel for being here tonight. We have grave, topics to discuss. There's vast opinions, both pro and con. The one thing I am sad about is that the business of the people is not getting done because of all the controversy that is surrounding all the political maelstrom that we're dealing with. For 21 This Week, I want to thank the audience for tuning in. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken. Thank you and good night.